Trump. That's not to take agency away from the president, who was bamboozled. I don't know why. He was too weak to say no. He was too gullible to see through the lies. One way or another, he allowed himself to be pushed into this.
Megyn Kelly once stood on Donald Trump's rally stage and urged Americans to vote for him. Now, listen to the words she is using to describe him today. She called him weak, gullible, and completely fooled. Those attacks are not coming from the political left. They are coming from someone who was once firmly on his side. During an interview with Piers Morgan, Kelly sharply criticized the very man she had campaigned for. She argued that the entire Iran war was a mistake from the very beginning. She said Trump had been warned by his own chairman of the Joint Chiefs, but chose to ignore that advice. Instead of listening to the United States military, she claimed he relied on guidance from Benjamin Netanyahu, Lindsey Graham, and a talk radio host. She even used a word that many people within the MAGA movement rarely dared to say. She called it a surrender. She said America surrendered to Iran and argued that it was the right decision because the war should never have happened in the first place. When loyal supporters begin speaking this way, it is not simply a change of opinion. It is a sign that the political climate has shifted. They can see a divided coalition and a struggling path toward the midterm elections, just like everyone else. Stay until the end because what Kelly said is far less important than the reason she suddenly feels comfortable saying it. Watch this. She said the Iranians proved to be incredibly tough and realized they possessed something even more powerful than a nuclear bomb.
Tough MFers. And they realized that they had something far more powerful than a nuclear bomb. They had control over the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump was warned prior to getting involved in this conflict by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs that they were not likely to collapse easily and that they probably would maintain control of the strait and could cause a global economic panic. And he didn't listen. What he did with the Dan Cain warnings was rush to Truth Social, Trump did, saying, all Dan Cain knows how to do is win. And if I tell him to invade, he's going to win. Well, that's not really what happened. There was never any question we could decimate their Navy or their Air Force. Of course, no one would ever second guess the power of the U.S. military. It's pristine and it's impeccable and it's truly awe-striking. But these battles in the Middle East have been fought now for 20 plus years, and we continue to learn the same lesson over and over. It is not their overwhelming air power or their incredible navies that keep us mired in quagmires. It's their insurgencies. It's this disparate way of fighting that we don't know how to handle. We can't tamp down with the amazing power of an aircraft carrier, which, by the way, we had trouble getting anywhere close there after they figured out how to attack it. And you know, we've already learned this. Trump watched us learn it. And so what led Trump, at 79 years old, to sit in there in that Situation Room when Bibi Netanyahu was seated as an equal? Yeah. Trump didn't even sit at the head of the table. Trump sat at the side of the table, and Bibi was across from him as an equal in the American Situation Room. What led him to sit there and buy what that guy was selling hook, line, and sinker when every other president was able to see through that liar? What was it? Because he was told the next day by our own top advisors, from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to the Secretary of State to the vice president, that these are lies and that these objectives are not going to be attainable. Don't believe him. We might be able to wipe out the Ayatollah, not regime change, Ayatollah. And we might be able to decimate some portion of their missiles and their military. Okay, that's true. But the goals as stated by Trump when we actually did pull the trigger were all over the board. And to this moment, he's pushing the BS claim that we affected regime change. No, we didn't. It's the same regime, just different players. There isn't somebody more moderate in there at all. We have no reason to believe that. In fact, it looks like the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is in control now, which is far more radical. And the fatwa that had allegedly been issued by the Ayatollah on developing nukes is gone. Iran is more powerful economically. It controls the strait and now is demanding the lifting of all sanctions against it. And what Trump did with that 10-point plan was go from Monday saying, no, not good, to Tuesday saying, very workable, we can do it, as a means of saving face to bail off of his insane threats about annihilating an entire civilization. So I don't know how we got here, Piers. I'd like to know just as much as anybody else, but all I can think in my head, based on what I've read in the paper, is we got here thanks to Bibi Netanyahu, Lindsey Graham, and Mark Levin. And ultimately President Trump. That's not to take agency away from the president, who was bamboozled. I don't know why. He was too weak to say no. He was too gullible to see through the lies. One way or another, he allowed himself to be pushed into this insane conflict that caused, forget, the blood and treasure we spilled. As you point out, at least 15 service personnel, I believe, were being lied to about the total number of dead and wounded. But we don't know what the accurate death toll in Iran is. How many civilians in Iran died? How many died in our allies around Iran who now don't trust us? What penalty do we pay other than the cost and the 15 lives that we expended, which count for a lot? But we didn't take the brunt of Iran's response. Our allies did, with whom we did not consult prior to starting this war, who are very, very angry, many of them, about what was done to them. What's going to happen to the trillions of dollars Trump was touting that they donated? They were offered to donate to the United States just to be nice guys and have great relations. You think they're going to spend that on us now? They're going to spend it on themselves. They've got to rebuild massive portions of their own countries thanks to the bombing campaign unleashed against them, because they were within reach, by Iran, who couldn't reach us. So we've upset our allies. We've pleased Israel, although now they're upset there's a ceasefire. We've upset the American base. The Trump coalition that got him elected is completely fractured and in smithereens. And he doesn't care, Piers, because he doesn't care about the Republican Party. He cares about himself. If Trump had to get reelected, he probably would have handled this a little differently. But he doesn't care that the Republicans are going to lose the midterms. I think he thought that was a foregone conclusion. And I don't think he cares that J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio wins the presidency next time around. I think there's a piece of Trump that would like to say, I'm the only one who could do it. The Republican Party's nothing without me. And the rest of us are going to be around to pick up the pieces.
On November 4th, 2024, in Pittsburgh, think back to who was standing on that stage. Megyn Kelly appeared at Donald Trump's final campaign rally and gave him the first public political endorsement of her entire career. That moment alone was remarkable because it marked a complete turnaround. Back in 2015, Trump had launched one of the harshest personal attacks of the Republican primary against Kelly after she challenged him during a debate. She endured that, eventually moved past it, and later told millions of her listeners that he was the leader who could protect the country. That is how far she went to stand beside him, which is why calling him weak, gullible, and fooled is not just criticism. It is a clear break from where she once stood. These kinds of breaks rarely happen because someone suddenly finds a new conscience. They happen because people recognize where their audience is headed. Kelly admitted it herself in the interview. She said the coalition is divided, the working class has pulled away, and the midterm outlook is falling apart. She is not warning about a coming storm. She is describing the reality her own audience is already living through. Commentators follow their audiences, and audiences respond to pain. In this case, that pain is not an abstract idea. It is reflected in the prices people see every time they stop at the gas pump. The week before the first bombs fell in February, the national average for a gallon of regular gasoline was around $2.96. By May 21st, it had climbed to $4.56. As of July 11th, AAA listed the average at $3.88, and prices were beginning to rise again as the ceasefire became increasingly unstable. That is roughly 92 cents more per gallon than before the war. For someone filling a 15-gallon tank, that works out to about $14 extra every visit, and nearly $700 more over the course of a year if they fill up once a week. It is a financial burden that voters never approved, and it falls hardest on the very people Kelly says Trump has lost. She is not courageous for noticing it now. She is simply arriving late. But there is one thing Kelly still refuses to say, and that may be the most revealing part of all. Listen carefully to how she frames her criticism. Netanyahu misled him. Graham pushed him. A radio host stirred things up. Trump was fooled. Every one of those claims sounds like an insult, but they also function as a defense, because describing someone as gullible still shifts responsibility away from them. No one forced the commander-in-chief into the Situation Room. He had a warning from his own chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he still ordered the strikes. Kelly continues to describe the war as a mistake in the past, even though the conflict is still unfolding. The ceasefire officially ended on July 8th. American forces launched strikes against roughly 90 targets inside Iran in a single operation. Jordan was intercepting Iranian missiles early that morning. At the NATO summit, Trump also threatened strikes against Iran's electrical grid and desalination facilities, infrastructure that provides drinking water, and that many experts argue could make such attacks a violation of the laws of war. Kelly is speaking as though the war has already ended, while the fighting continues. That is what this moment really represents. When a loyal supporter says the word surrender out loud, millions of others suddenly feel they have permission to think the same thing. Political coalitions rarely collapse because of protests alone. They fall apart when influential voices begin changing their position, and that is exactly what you have just witnessed.